What if time was actually speeding up and no one was paying attention? Have you ever felt like the days are passing by faster? That time is slipping through your fingers as if you were running away from something or someone. Maybe this isn't just an impression. Maybe the planet you live on is moving faster than it should, and you're feeling the consequences without realizing it. Now imagine waking up one day and discovering that everything around you, the clock, the calendar, your own body, is out of rhythm. Not because of human error, but because the Earth silently began to spin faster. No warnings, no noise, just an almost invisible and deadly change. There's something strange going on beneath our feet, something that's affecting time, our perception, and possibly the very fabric of reality. But why isn't anyone talking about it? And why are some scientists on alert? Comment below, do you think the Earth is speeding up? Have you ever felt like the days are getting shorter, even though everything seems the same? I want to know what you think about this, because what you're about to discover could change the way you view time, the planet, and maybe even your own existence. Some evidence suggests this may be more than just a theory. And in this video, you'll learn why this phenomenon may be happening right now. For decades, we believed that the Earth's motion was stable, predictable, and nearly unchanging. But the absolute precision of atomic clocks has revealed something that had escaped our eyes and senses. The Earth's rotation is accelerating, and this is not just an estimate. It is a fact documented by scientists around the world. In 2020, the planet recorded the shortest day since time began to be measured accurately. A complete rotation of the Earth was completed in just 1.4602 milliseconds, less than the standard 24 hours. This number may seem insignificant, but when it comes to the rotation of a sphere over 12,000 kilometers in diameter, any variation, even a small one, can generate imbalances in highly sensitive chains. Timekeeping on a global scale relies on these fractional seconds. Satellites, navigation systems, telecommunications networks, and banking transactions are all calibrated to a standard time. When the planet starts to spin out of sync, the accuracy of these systems is at risk. GPS, for example, calculates positions based on coordinates synchronized with time. An error of even a millisecond can distort locations, routes, and automated systems. This means that what seems like an astronomical phenomenon is actually affecting the functioning of systems that support the global infrastructure. Even more intriguing is that this acceleration doesn't follow a fixed pattern. Earth's rotation varies for complex reasons, including the movement of the liquid core, changes in the atmosphere, earthquakes, and even the redistribution of mass in the oceans. But in recent years, the frequency of these anomalies has increased, suggesting that there are forces at work that science doesn't yet fully understand. The planet is breaking its own records on a scale that was previously unimaginable. And that has raised alarm bells in the scientific community. Most people will never hear about it, and even those who do don't understand the impact. But there is one thing that all the fields that study the phenomenon have in common: the feeling that something is starting to slip away from its natural stability. What if the rotation keeps accelerating? The days could disappear before our eyes. But this dynamic hides a consequence that few people know about. If the Earth continues to spin faster, it is not just the weather that will be affected. The planet's geography itself would begin to be redrawn by the centrifugal force generated by the accelerated rotation. This force, which already acts naturally by gently pushing masses toward the equator, would intensify to the point of altering the balance between water, air, and land mass. In practice, the oceans would begin to migrate subtly, accumulating more intensely in equatorial regions. This displacement, although slow and progressive, would cause a chain effect. The redistribution of water would alter the pressure on the ocean floor, modifying the behavior of ocean currents. which are essential for global thermal balance. Currents like the Gulf Stream, which transport heat from the tropics to the north of the planet, could be distorted or weakened. This would cause climate anomalies in entire regions. Temperate zones would experience extremes of heat or cold. The stability of the seasons would begin to give way, and with it, the predictability of the climate that sustains agriculture, biodiversity, and urban life. At the same time, the atmosphere would also react to the change in rotation. The air, which moves with the planet, would experience a subtle but continuous imbalance. Wind patterns would rearrange themselves aggressively. Tropical storms would gain strength. Tornadoes would become more frequent in unexpected areas, and evaporation and precipitation cycles could become chaotic. Desert regions would experience flash floods. Coastal areas would suffer from unusually high tides. These changes would not necessarily be sudden, but their effects would be cumulative and irreversible over the long term. And unlike a single natural disaster, they would be nearly impossible to contain. The Earth would be rewriting its own climate boundaries, and there is one aspect that makes this scenario even more disturbing. Earth's climate system is interdependent. Changing one variable, like rotation, affects all the others. But the real complexity arises when you consider the impact of this on something that cannot be controlled by satellites or weather forecasts. There is an invisible link between this movement and an even broader phenomenon. The human body works in tune with the Earth's rotation, and this is not a metaphor. Our biological rhythms are programmed for approximately 24-hour cycles. This natural synchrony regulates sleep, hormone production, body temperature, metabolism, and even mood. What few people know is that this calibration directly depends on the length of a full day. If the Earth's rotation were to speed up and the days shorten, even by a few minutes, this change would cause a profound biological misalignment. The circadian rhythm, our internal clock, would no longer coincide with the external environment. The result? A permanent state of physiological imbalance. People would start to show signs of exhaustion even after a night's sleep. The release of melatonin, the hormone that induces rest, would be affected. Waking up and going to sleep would no longer follow a logical pattern. This may seem simple, but in the long term, the consequence would be a significant increase in disorders such as chronic insomnia, anxiety, and depression. What's more, memory, concentration, and decision-making ability would also be compromised. Hormones like cortisol, which help us deal with stress and control our state of alertness, would experience unexpected fluctuations. This would trigger chain reactions in the immune, cardiovascular, and digestive systems. The body, unable to understand the new patterns in its environment, would begin to react erratically. In a world where the weather changes, even what we eat, when we eat, and how the body stores energy would change. These effects would not only appear in urban environments, even isolated populations far from technological influence would feel the impact. That is because it's not a question of lifestyle, it's a question of biology. Humans have evolved for millennia at a fixed pace. When that pace changes, the entire species goes into shock. Living on a biologically dysregulated planet is like being permanently jet-lagged, with no possibility of adaptation. The feeling of being displaced through time would become the new normal, and no one would be able to escape it, not even by sleeping. When something as basic as time begins to fail, everything we know comes into question. The idea that we live on a reliable, regulated, predictable planet has perhaps never been so illusory. And understanding this isn't just a matter of curiosity. It's almost a survival instinct. So, leave your like on the video now. This is a clear sign that you value content that goes beyond the surfaces, that provoses, that questions, that reveals what almost nobody is talking about. It is this kind of support that makes YouTube's algorithm understand that knowledge still matters, and that mysteries like this need to continue to be explored. Now think, if your body is already feeling the changes in rotation and you haven't noticed yet, what else could be happening beneath our feet? Without any warning, much of what we call modern life depends on a single invisible variable, the precision of time. Financial systems, global communications, satellite navigation, air travel, they all revolve around fractions of a second. And when the Earth's rotation starts to shift, even slightly, this invisible axis of reliability begins to falter. Satellites in orbit, for example, operate based on calculations that are extremely sensitive to time and position. An error of just a few milliseconds can cause significant shifts in geographic coordinates. This means that a GPS could position you in the wrong location, cause an aircraft to deviate from its course, or cause critical failures in automated tracking systems. The synchronization between satellites and reference points on Earth depends on a stable rotating planet. When this basis changes, the entire system loses coherence. Furthermore, telecommunications work with absolute synchronization between servers and networks around the planet. A slight acceleration in rotation can break this harmony, delaying data packets, interrupting transmissions, and disrupting systems that were previously considered infallible. And this is not limited to phone calls or internet connections. Military systems, emergency signals, and air traffic control networks are also at risk. The financial sector, which is highly dependent on high-frequency trading, would be directly affected. Stock exchanges, banking transactions, and algorithms that operate based on microtimes would lose precision, generating distortions and failures on a global scale. Imagine a system where buy and sell orders are processed out of order due to a timing error. The collapse could start with invisible numbers and spread with uncontrollable speed. And there is one point that is often overlooked: global logistics. Ships, trains, trucks, and planes follow routes that are planned based on automated systems that depend on real time. If the world clock starts to fail, the entire network that moves people and goods starts to operate blindly. The consequence of this would not only be delays, it would be the collapse of predictability. Time, in this case, is not just a measurement. It is the invisible foundation that supports accuracy. And if that foundation starts to fail, what else could be compromised without us noticing immediately? Imagine waking up and discovering that the day is now only 12 hours long. Not because the sun disappeared, but because the Earth simply started spinning faster. Instead of gradual adaptation, the world is forced to reorganize or collapse. What would happen to society if the time we use to organize everything no longer made sense? The length of days and nights defines more than just when we go to sleep or wake up. It structures calendars, regulates rituals, determines work shifts, holidays, harvests, and even how governments function. If the cycles of light and darkness were drastically shortened, the concept of a working day would disappear. People would have less time to perform basic tasks. The sense of urgency would become permanent, and the clock as we know it today would become obsolete. In such a scenario, a new standard of measurement would need to be created. Current clocks, based on 24 hours, would have to be redesigned to use a new time signature. Automated systems would fail until they were recalibrated. The counting of hours, minutes, and seconds would be reconfigured, and with it, the entire linear time structure on which we have built civilization. The seasons would also lose stability. Rotation influences the way the planet receives sunlight. If it were out of sync, cycles of heat and cold would become unpredictable. A summer could last weeks, a winter hours. Agriculture, dependent on predictability, would fail. Scarcity would no longer be a future prediction and would become a present reality. Religions that base their rituals on the passage of the sun and moon would have to reformulate their own sacred concepts. Festivities would lose their meaning. Historical dates would become technically invalid. Time, one of the few things that seemed immutable, would reveal its fragility. Culturally, the impact would be devastating. Without a reliable reference of past, present, and future, social organization as we know it would enter into crisis. Work, education, personal relationships, everything would have to be reconstructed based on a new logic of time, which no one would have the experience to manage. The idea that time could get out of control is uncomfortable, but every detail that science reveals makes this hypothesis less absurd than we would like to believe. Now imagine the impact this would have on your life. How would you deal with a world where time lost its meaning? Do you think you could adapt to a new count, or would humanity enter a psychological and cultural collapse? Leave your theory in the comments. Do you believe that time can be reprogrammed? Or are we simply at the mercy of a force we will never be able to control? Share your vision. Maybe it will help us understand what's to come. Because when we look at the possible causes of this acceleration, we find that the answer may not just lie on the Earth's surface, but deeper down, and perhaps even beyond. What if time stopped being an ally and became our invisible enemy? The acceleration of the Earth's rotation is not random. There are physical mechanisms that can influence this phenomenon, and many of them are being studied carefully. One of the most discussed hypotheses is the movement of the planet's inner core. This layer, composed of iron and nickel in a solid state, rotates at a different speed than the rest of the Earth. Changes in the dynamics between the core and the mantle could modify the planet's angular momentum, interfering with global rotation. Another possibility is the accelerated melting of glaciers. When large masses of ice disappear, the redistribution of the weight of water on the Earth's surface changes the distribution of planetary mass. This shift, although imperceptible visually, can affect the axis of rotation and the speed of rotation. In recent years, the drastic reduction of the polar ice caps has raised suspicions that we are witnessing a chain reaction. There are also studies on the influence of gravitational tides generated by the moon and the sun. Although normally stable, these forces can be subject to variations due to specific cosmic events, such as coronal mass ejections, explosions of solar plasma that travel through space and can interfere with the Earth's magnetic fields. The accumulation of these effects, combined with other spatial disturbances, could cause minimal but significant oscillations in the rotation. And beyond the traditional explanations, less accepted theories emerge, but they are impossible to completely ignore. Some propose that events on a larger scale, such as the movement of the galaxy or the passage of massive objects close to the solar system, could alter the gravitational balance of the planet. Other, even bolder ideas suggest that we are experiencing a transition of reality, a subtle rupture in the way we perceive time and space, caused by phenomena that science does not yet have the tools to decipher. The common thread between all these approaches is uncertainty. No explanation so far is definitive. Only hypotheses, some more conservative, others more speculative. But they all point to the same warning: something is changing and we don't yet know why. What if this phenomenon is not just a physical consequence, but a sign? A hint that something bigger is about to happen, and no one is ready to understand what it really means. We live with the impression that we control time. Stopwatches, calendars, diaries. But all of this structure depends on something we did not create: the movement of the Earth. When this movement changes, even by milliseconds, we are forced to face an uncomfortable truth. Time has never been under our control. We are simply following a gear that was already turning long before we existed. The acceleration of the planet's rotation is not just a physical phenomenon. It is a mirror. It reflects the pace we have imposed on modern life: faster, more productive, more immediate. We are racing against time in every possible sense. We work beyond our limits. We live connected. We demand results from ourselves in increasingly shorter cycles. And suddenly, the planet itself seems to be accelerating along with this logic. Or perhaps we are just realizing too late how much we have lost control. This possible coincidence between the physical acceleration of the Earth and the psychological rhythm of societies raises a profound question: have we become disconnected from real time? The time that shapes the human body, that defines the cycles of nature, that gives meaning to pauses. The change in rotation forces us to re-evaluate not only our technologies, but our priorities, our perception of urgency, and even our way of living. We are creatures that depend on a delicate balance: a stable planet, a controlled atmosphere, a constant gravitational field. Any slight change in these elements, which we have always taken for granted, has the potential to disrupt everything we know. The accelerated rotation is just one more reminder of this. Perhaps the real threat is not the collapse of technology, institutions, or the clock. Perhaps the greatest risk is ignoring how fragile we are in the face of forces we cannot predict or influence. And perhaps, deep down, the greatest lesson lies precisely there, recognizing that living in balance with time is not an abstract choice. It is a biological, cultural, and existential necessity. The Earth's rotation speeding up by a few milliseconds may seem irrelevant amid so many global events, but that is precisely where the risk lies, in what happens discreetly, far from the headlines, without explosions, without alarms, and yet it changes everything. The Earth doesn't need to be knocked out of orbit, hit by an asteroid, or swallowed by a black hole to put us in danger. A slight increase in its rotation speed is enough to affect technologies, natural systems, our health, our way of life, and even our perception of what is real. Time has always been perceived as a constant flow, something that slips through our fingers but always returns the next day. Today, this certainty is being questioned by data, by science, and by a growing sense that we are disconnecting from the natural logic that has sustained our existence up until now. Perhaps the biggest challenge is not understanding time on a technical, physical, or astronomical level. Perhaps the real question is, do we know how to live with it? Our lifestyles, our relationships, our social structure, everything was built on an illusion of control. And now that that illusion is being eroded, we are left with a choice: adapt or resist. Living on a planet that spins faster means living in a world where every second matters because it no longer lasts as long as it used to. It means accepting that our survival depends on our ability to read subtle signals and adjust our behavior before it wears too late. The Earth's acceleration is more than a scientific curiosity. It is a blunt reminder that our stability depends on balances we have never had the power to command, only to respect. And that brings us back to the inevitable question: are we really prepared to pivot faster, or are we just pretending nothing is changing? The Earth is accelerating. Time, which we have always considered a secure base, is beginning to show signs of instability. And as distant as it may seem from our routine, this phenomenon directly affects everything we are: body, mind, technology, culture. The question that remains is, do you think the Earth could continue to accelerate? And if time really started to slip away from our control, what would we do? This type of reflection cannot be restricted to a few. If this video made you question everything you know about time and the planet, share it with someone who needs to see it before it's too late. Spreading this conversation is about sparking an awakening and perhaps opening eyes to something many are not yet ready to see. Now, if this content has awakened in you the desire to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of the universe, this is the time to subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is an invitation to question, imagine, and discover what science is still trying to decipher. Activate the bell to receive the next alerts, because what comes next could change the way you understand reality. Being a part of this is more than just watching. It is taking a stand among those who want to understand what's behind what we call normality. And you know, it can change at any moment. And speaking of change, there is a point of instability that can alter not only the rhythm of the planet, but the essence of what makes it habitable. A silent, profound transformation, and perhaps already underway. Now click on the video that is appearing on your screen. What you'll find may defy logic even further, and take your mind into territory few dare to explore.